There we go. Working with a really terrible developer. We recognize them, managers don't. Um, I don't think that's always true. I think it's a matter of sometimes they can't do anything about it. Just like you're helpless, sometimes I think the managers are helpless too, right? Because you've got a certain number of man hours that are expected to work on a project, which don't get me started on how terrible that idea is of man hours and resources. I mean, I use those terms sometimes too, unfortunately, because it's just the way that the business goes. But I mean, we're people, and to call it man hours is just kind of it's a little bit cheapening of humanity. But I get it. It's a way to try to measure availability and how much effort is being applied to a particular thing. By the way, don't forget to drink your coffee. I did bring some today. I make good coffee. I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but I do think I make good coffee. Maybe I should open up my own brew house or something. Anyway, so if you've never had this experience, you have my envy. You're on a development team, and one of the developers does sloppy work, and there is nothing you can do about it. Nothing you can do about it. I think there is. I suspect that there are ways that you can do something about it, and like, mentioning to your manager is probably not the best thing, but actually mentioning it in passing as a group or working with that individual in a kind and respectful feedback environment can actually allow you to have these kind of conversations. Okay? And the real tricky thing about dealing with sloppy code and dealing with people who write sloppy code is that you don't at all put it on them. Okay? You actually put it on the code itself. So you say, so this little piece of code right here, this piece that I've identified, well, it could be rewritten this way. Or, the code just doesn't quite look right to me. I think we could probably apply some single responsibility here and break things out into separate functions and kind of pull those out into some classes based upon the resources. Maybe we could do something with the dependency injection here, right? So trying to actually bring that person in, working with them and identifying not them, but the code that was written. Okay, it's the code, not the person. And that's the important thing about feedback. You can still talk in terms of like soft skills with people, like, hey, I gotta tell you, that one time that we were having that conversation and you broke in and said that thing to Debbie, that kind of bothered me a little bit. Like, I don't think that she really felt that great about it. There are ways of giving a proper feedback to people on their soft skills, but when you're talking about code that people wrote, don't talk about them, talk about the code. Okay? That's my best tip for you, is if you're dealing with somebody who is a bad developer, and don't make it about them. Make it about the code that has been written, and try to remove them from the equation of the code. And trust me, there's still going to be some defensiveness. Like, oh, I wrote it this way because I was thinking this. Let them say that. Let them say all of those things and let them express themselves, okay? It's not a judgment about them or who they are as a person. It is a judgment about the code itself and trying to find ways of improving the code, okay? Not trying to find ways of improving the person. I cannot emphasize this point enough. It is something you have to consciously do at first, because there's going to be a drive, there's going to be a pull for you to be saying, hey, you wrote it this way, or what were you thinking when you did this, and why were you trying to do it this way? There's going to be a real pull for that. And instead, you have to be very, very narrowly hyper-focused on the fact that the code is what we're talking about. Not you, but the code as written could be improved this way. Okay? So I don't buy this, there's nothing you can do about it. I totally disagree with that. There is something you can do about it. If it's a matter of time, we need to find more time, like we don't have enough time to discuss this code, or, Well, then I'm sure there's a code review that's going on, right? There's code reviews going on before the code goes into the code base, or at least there should be. If there's not, then that needs to happen. So that's the first step, is making sure you have a code review to go over all the code that's being put into the trunk of your code base. Time was when everyone in software, from the first day QA trainee to the executives, had some experience at coding. The executives had some experience of coding? I mean, maybe if you're only doing, maybe this guy's talking about more specifically startup companies, startup businesses, then that might be possible, but not in the typical enterprise environment, right? That is long gone, and now we have layers of methodology masters and managers who have never written a line and who regard any and all complaints about others' work as insubordinate and as personal conflicts, never considering the criticisms on their technical merits. I just got to reread that again to make sure I fully absorb what he's saying there. Time was when everyone in software... Okay, yeah, we already got that. That is long gone, and now we have layers of methodology masters and managers who have never written a line. That's... I kind of actually agree with that. I do buy into what he's saying there a little bit, in that the division of labor has become so strict and stringent that everyone has their own set of practices that they abide by, and they become methodologies, right? They become masters of that methodology. This is my job. I'm going to narrowly focus on my job, and don't you dare tell me how to do my job other than how I already know how to do it. So I kind of agree with what he's saying there. And who regard any and all complaints about others' work as insubordinate and as personal conflicts. Honestly, it almost sounds like that's what he's saying, is that everything is about personal conflicts. I mean, maybe not. Maybe I'm misreading that, but... And who regard any and all complaints about others' work as insubordinate and personal conflicts. I think you can run into some managers that do kind of... They want to avoid any sort of conflict within the team, right? And so they don't know how to do feedback properly. And so they just want to quash all divisiveness, right? Like, the fact that you don't like something is on you, and that's it. It's not that there's poor quality of work, but rather that you are being insubordinate, like you said, and it's, and you're the one that's actually at fault. All right, so personal conflicts, never considering the criticisms on their technical merit. And I think that kind of goes back to make sure that when you are framing the discussion that you are about to have, that it is narrowly and hyper-focused on the code and the technical practices that are being employed. And don't make it about any particular person, like especially when we're talking about practices that the team has agreed to. And maybe there hasn't been a team agreement. That might be something that you need to do. Maybe you and your team need to actually say, we need a team working agreement, and make that kind of the thing. Like, what are the standards by which we are going to operate as a team, so that we can actually have some of that? We can actually know where everybody's supposed to be in line with the way that we perceive our jobs. Okay, and that also goes back to some of the technical merits too. Like some of the technical practices that we as a team will ascribe to. These are the things that we're going to do. And I'm talking in terms of things like, if you're going to do TDD, for example, or if you're going to do pair programming, or, what is the testing framework that you guys are going to use? What are some of the testing, are you going to do a CI/CD pipeline? Are you going to do a linter? Some of these technical practices that the team can say we are going to do as a team. That's something that you can kind of figure out if you're doing some sort of team working agreement. But if there's no agreement in place, then you can't have those kind of conversations. And I think that's probably another one of those early steps that you need to take, is make sure you have a team working agreement so that you can have these discussions on the technical merits of something, right? And then the discussion becomes about the technical practices that the team is going to do and not about one particular individual and what they are doing. Okay? It's important. You want to extract the person away from this conversation as much as possible. Don't make it personal. It's your responsibility as the person giving the feedback to make sure you are splitting the person away from the code and the practice. Okay? So you have to be very clear about that. If I say that one of the other members of the group is doing shoddy work, even if I explain politely and in technical detail, managers hear unpleasantness and focus all their attention on team cohesion, which means I'm the one who gets in trouble. And again, from the perspective of the writer, I understand what the writer is trying to say here. But again, I think that that's because just because you have a manager does not mean that is who you always take complaints to. That is not always who you give feedback to. I think we all, there's difficulty that we sometimes have in confronting people that we have maybe a lesser opinion about. Right? And maybe not in general, maybe not like we don't like this person, but for this one particular case, because this person has done this practice in this particular way, I kind of have a little bit of a lower opinion about the way that they're doing their work. And so you don't want to hurt their feelings, right? You don't want to say anything that's going to hurt their feelings because you're genuinely a good person. And it's not that you don't like this person. It's not that you think overall they're a bad person. It's just that they're not doing things the right way, and we need to correct that. We need to bring them up to, if you're perceiving it as we need to bring them up to our level, you're going to, again, have some problems with that. And if you're trying to go to the manager about this, that makes it even worse, because now you are going to their superior so that their superior will tell them what to do. And that's not the right way to go about this. Again, you need to do a team-oriented design, right? It's either everybody is going to envelop these things, and we need to agree upon these things. Or when I'm giving you feedback, I am being very concrete about this specific code and this specific example, right? Like this little thing here, if we did it this way and demonstrate it to that person, and if they don't get it, look, you're not going to change their minds, okay? You're not always going to get your way. You're not always going to be able to change their opinion of how they're doing their job, but you have to make sure it's not about them and their job. You have to make sure, again, I can't stress this enough, it needs to be about the code, not them. So it is very, very important when you're giving this feedback that you keep that in mind and you don't try to go at them about it. All right, so externalities. I was working until a few weeks ago on a distributed team for a company in England. One team member, whom I will refer to as L, not only did terrible work, more on this below, but on the daily Zoom status update was 3 times louder than anyone else, had a voice that could etch diamond, and had about the worst English pronunciation I've ever heard, and insisted on hijacking others' computers with a compulsive screen share that illuminated nothing, just so the rest of us could watch him wiggle his mouse. Okay. So this is a concrete example that he's trying to give about this type of thing. By the way, I think something is wrong with before I jump into that, can anybody in the chat, can you just say hi real quick to make sure that I know that you're here? So anybody watching, just pop into the live chat, say hi, let me know that you're here, because I think the viewer count is wrong on this thing, and I don't know why it constantly gives me the wrong number, I think. So just let me know that you're here. I just like to know that people are actually watching and giving me their feedback. Okay, so back to this. So I was working until a few weeks ago on a distributed team for a company in England. One member, who I'll refer to as L, not only did terrible work, but on the daily Zoom. So let's talk about this. So on the daily Zoom status update, they were 3 times louder than anyone else. Okay, so is that because of a technical thing, or is that because they're actually like me? They're a personality type like me that's a little bit louder. And again, there are ways of being of handling these kind of people, like me. You know, the way that you handle me is you let me say a thing, and then you have to give me feedback that just simply says something like, did everybody else catch that? Or I appreciate the feedback, or I appreciate the understanding and the knowledge that you're trying to transfer here. Is there something wrong? And make it about the technical thing. Is there something wrong with your microphone? Right? Is there something, because it sounds, you're coming across a little bit louder than everybody else. I think that's probably your microphone. Can you just make sure that the mic is down a little bit? Because I'm having to turn down my speakers every time that you're speaking, and I just don't want to do that. I want to be able to hear you clearly without having these type of disruptions. So, trying to be, again, it's difficult, I understand, but you have to think of creative ways of making it not about the person, but rather about the technical thing, right? Had a voice that could etch diamond. Again, that's probably, there's something, you might even be able to just adjust like the boost, boost the lower levels of your speakers or something like that. Do some sort of EQ to maybe fix some of that, because it may help. Maybe there's something on your end. But again, maybe just simply asking, hey, your microphone is up really loud. Is there any chance you can turn that down a little bit? Nothing. I want to be able to hear you clearly, but I'm having a real hard time hearing because of the distortion of the microphone. Okay. Had about the worst English pronunciation I have ever heard. You're not going to be able to get over that. Okay. Like, listen, I understand what you're saying here, because I've had to deal with people who don't necessarily speak very clearly. I try to be fairly clear in how I say things. I think that's why I have this channel. That's why I have, tutorials, and that's why I'm successful in some ways in that case. And my job is because I have clarity of voice and pronunciation. You're not going to be able to change that overnight, but if you consistently ask, like, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand. Are you saying, just try to get some clarity. Try not to make it again about the person, but rather just trying to make sure that the communication is clearly heard. Or you can even go so far as to say, hey, you know what? That's a great idea. Can you write that down on an email and send it to us? Right? That way you get clarity on what was just said. Or, hey, that was such a great idea. Can you put that thought in the chat? There's creative ways of doing this. You just have to, and it's a struggle. I totally get it. But just understand that you are improving you by doing these things. It's frustrating. And this is another one of those things that I have to coach people on all the time. When you're working with difficult individuals on a team, you have to make it about becoming a better person. You becoming a better person. It's frustrating. Trust me, it's a struggle. I totally get it. It is a struggle. But what you are doing is you need to refine and work on your interpersonal skills. And this is an opportunity. It should be seen as an opportunity. This person really rubs me the wrong way. How can I figure out a way to cope with this and work properly with this person? Because there's going to be all sorts of different people with all sorts of different challenges that you have to overcome. And that's really, that may not be on that person. You're not going to be able to change that person, but you can change you. You can change yourself. That's the only thing that you actually have control over. So figure out how to control things, how to control yourself so that you can integrate with whatever that person is trying to whatever information that person is trying to stream out. Okay, so it is kind of on you. Think of it as an opportunity to become an adapter, right? And learn a new skill or challenge yourself to overcome this. And insisted on hijacking others' computers with a compulsive screen share that illuminated nothing, just so the rest of us could watch him wiggle his mouse. Look, this very well could be, and I think what may be happening here is they are trying to show competency. They are trying to show, and this really does kind of hit home with me, because I know people like this in the industry that I have had a great fondness for, but they don't maybe necessarily know exactly what they're doing, and so they try to overcompensate, and they work really hard on proving themselves. I mean, I've even done this myself. I think we all have at some point. We can all kind of sympathize with this. Like, we have to prove how good we are at something. And so we want to do that. We want to demonstrate our skills in order to show you. And especially if this person is feeling neglected because they have poor communication skills, like you just mentioned in this article, right? They have a difficult time expressing themselves. They have, voice issues. People don't want to listen to them. They have, they have the speaker or our microphone issue, and they come across loudly. Like, all of those things actually indicate to me in the whole body that this person feels insecure. They don't feel secure in their job. They don't feel secure about the work that they're doing. And the worst thing you can possibly do is to tell them that they should be insecure and that they're doing their job wrong. Because that's just going to make them do this more, right? They're going to want to do these things more because they're trying to prove to you that they are good at what they do, and what they're trying to do is of good quality. And you telling them that it's not good quality is just going to reinforce this behavior and make them do it louder and do it more and take over more. So that's the thing, right? Like, your immediate reaction is to try to reject this person, but what you actually have to do is embrace it and tell them, find as the good things that they're doing and reinforce those good things. Okay? Tell them they are doing a good job in ways that you can find. Okay, maybe this one particular case that we're talking about, they're not doing a great job, but don't focus on that. Focus on the things that they are doing good. Try to find something that they are good at doing and make sure you pound it into them that they are doing an excellent job in those ways. Okay? And that should help loosen things up a little bit, and you start to gain their trust a little bit, because they will see you identify them as a person. And you have acknowledged their humanity. You've acknowledged them as a person. So they will begin to trust you because of this. Okay? And if you don't have that rapport with them, when you go and tell them that, hey, this thing isn't quite right, if you don't have that rapport, they're going to reject it, and they're just going to get louder and more boisterous and want to take over more. And to prove themselves, to prove how right they are, to prove you wrong, right? Because it's a challenge to them and their person. And if you don't develop that trust by telling them all the good things that they have done, then that's all that you're going to get. So that's the thing. You've got to make sure that you develop some sort of rapport with them. Try to find the good things that they do so that when it comes to these type of situations, you can give them the feedback and the quote-unquote negative feedback, and it will be more accepted because you've also told them all the good things that they do. And this is kind of, again, the sandwich technique. In case you guys don't know about this, the sandwich technique is something I employ all the time. Okay? Tell them some good things about something, then give them the bad news, and then sandwich it and bookend it with another good thing. Right? So good thing, bad thing. So sandwich, right? Good thing, bad thing, good thing. Okay? That's how you do it. And it doesn't always work. It doesn't always soften the blow completely, but it does kind of help lubricate the discussion a little bit, makes it a little bit more fluid and a little bit easier to compensate and work with. But yeah, just if you're not pointing out good things, then why should they listen to you say the bad things? Okay? That it is upon you. It is on you. If you have identified these things, it is not on them, it is on you, because you are the only one who can change. You cannot change them. You can only change yourself. Okay? All right. To say he was robotic would be an insult to robots. He was mechanical. His reaction to any transition was always the same. His turn to talk? Let me share my screen. Get an error message? Take a screenshot. Explain a key word. Another screenshot. Thanks, L. I didn't know how to spell foreign key. Again, this just screams of he's trying to prove his knowledge. He's trying to prove that he is a good worker. Okay? That's all they're trying to do. And you have to acknowledge, as pedantic as this stuff might be, you have to acknowledge it so that you can gain trust. If you are not gaining trust with this person, then why should they trust you when you tell them they are doing something wrong? Okay, that's it. I came to dread the call because his abrasive and loud voice gave me a headache, and I had the usual reaction of his wrong syllable accenting debugging in the Chrome console that most of us have when we call tech support and get one of those unintelligible helpers who don't even listen to the issue before telling you to reformat and reinstall. If they don't have trust in you, they're not going to listen to you. All you can do is just pronounce those words back at them correctly, or use them in your own sentences correctly, and maybe, hopefully, they'll pick up on it. Okay, that's all you can really do. Again, you cannot change them. Don't try to change them. Trying to change them will only force them to give you more of the things you don't want, because that is how they are trained to communicate. Worst of all, L appeared to get cognitively rebooted for every few minutes. That's an interesting statement. Worst of all, L appeared to get cognitively rebooted every few minutes. This company had its Git branches set up all wrong, 2 master branches in the same repo, one for the front end and one for the back. Interesting. That is weird. I have to grant you that is a weird, I don't know the total circumstances, but that I can kind of see how that would go, but that is a weird setup. That I don't know that it's wrong. I might, like, if I saw it, I'd probably go, yeah, that's wrong. But I don't know. I can kind of see a way that's an interesting way to do it. I don't know that I would agree with it either, but anyway. My cryptography work was in a branch off the front end master. Cryptography on the front end? You're doing cryptography? You're doing business logic in the front end? That doesn't... I'm a little concerned about that. We'd been talking about the branches by name for 10 minutes, and it was clear as could be that I was doing my work in front-end crypto, which we both had mentioned many times. He suddenly asked me, apropos of nothing, Chris, which branch are you working in? Okay, look, sometimes you can have a discussion and people just forget. That's not cognitive rebooting. That's just simply you've lost track of certain thoughts because you've gotten involved in other things. Your mind has wandered into other areas and is trying to fix or find some sort of pathway. And there were stops along the way. There were road signs. I mean, we've all experienced, this is a perfect example, right? You're driving down the road. If you've ever driven a vehicle for any length of time, you will pass by several road signs and never even acknowledge them. You might pass, like if you're driving down the highway and there's a road sign that says such and town XYZ in 15 miles, town XYZ in 10 miles, town XYZ in 5 miles, town XYZ in 3 miles. And then you get to the town and you're like, oh, what's the name of this town? Right? Like that happens. You can have road signs. You can have things. You even look at those signs. And you're so focused on the driving and how you're going and your destination and maybe what's the conversation going on in the car or the radio's got, like all of those things are distractions away from maybe those road signs along the way. So the fact that he doesn't remember which branch it is that you're in, that happens. You just got to deal with that. Like you probably have, I'm sorry, author, whoever you are. Let's see. The author is Chris Fox, like respectively, Chris. I guarantee you do the same thing in other ways. It may not show up in exactly this way. It may not show up in exactly in which branch you're working out of, but I guarantee you there are things that you forget even after they've been told to you. Okay. Several times. I guarantee it. I guarantee everybody's like this. Like this is a basic human trait. Unless you are literally a savant who forgets nothing, you are somehow, photographic memory or something like that. That's the only way that you could possibly remember everything. So don't tell me that just because this person, I get it. There's some annoyance there. You may have mentioned the branch several times. You think it's ridiculous that this person forgot, but trust me, it's because they're thinking about other things. It just wasn't the priority on their mind at the time that it was mentioned. Okay, and just right now in this moment, they're thinking about something and they have forgotten that piece of information. It's pretty simple. All right, this sort of thing happened many times, and managers would patiently explain to him what any 8-year-old could have followed. They could see he wasn't tracking, but for some reason it was only a problem when I expressed my frustration at having to explain simple matters over and over again. Okay, that is a sentence that is in complete and total contradiction to the whole proposition that you are making here. We recognize them and managers don't. Your subtitle is that managers don't recognize bad developers. And lo and behold, right here, right in this sentence, they could see he wasn't tracking, but for some reason, it was only a problem when I expressed my frustration. Again, that is a completely contradictory statement to your subtitle. Dude, I appreciate the fact that you wrote this article because I know that it takes time to put these things together. But you probably should not have a statement in your article that directly contradicts the entire preposition. I'm just saying. That's like, trust me, I'm sure that I've done this too. I'm just telling you. And maybe I've already broken my own rule. Like I'm making it about this dude. I'm making it about this guy, Chris, right? Yeah, Chris Fox. Dude, I apologize that I've made it about you. I shouldn't be making it about you. It's really not about you. It is about this. This is not a correct thing to do of essentially making a preposition, or not preposition, but making a statement here that says that managers don't recognize bad developers. And then in your example, in the example given, it then goes on to say he wasn't tracking and they could see it. Okay. If they can see it, then that means they see it. And it's not that the managers don't. Okay. Look, but again, sorry. Again, my apologies, Chris. I'm totally filleting your poor article. I am just like, I'm trying to use it as a jumping off point to help educate people who are trying to deal with difficult coworkers, because it is tough. And I'm glad that you at least are trying to express this, but it seems like you're missing kind of the bigger point in how do you solve this? How do you resolve these issues? And that's something that I think we need to, that we really need to address in this. Okay, bad code. I usually work in the C family of languages, and in development, I write in C#. Cool. Awesome. I love C#. I had to learn JavaScript, Python, and Django. I ended up working almost exclusively in JavaScript and in the front end. I'm usually a back-end developer. In this project, L did all the back-end work. Okay, so that kind of explains why you are doing crypto in the front end, is because you're probably writing it in JavaScript, but still, I don't understand why crypto belongs in the front end. Like, the front end is for user interface. What in the world is your business logic doing in JavaScript on the front end? That seems a little wrong. There's some architectural questions I have about that. But anyway, he did a lot of work, all of it very low quality, in addition to industry standard illegibility. He did the absolute bare minimum in rigor that he could get away with. That is actually the standard, I think, in the industry, don't you? Dear viewers, do you believe that you do your absolute rigor, your total and full maximum effort on every single thing that you do? Especially if the people that you are working with seem to be ungrateful for the work that you are doing? Right? Are you going to put your maximum effort and rigor into it? I don't think so. I think most of us are kind of on the default setting of lazy. Most of us will only do the bare minimum, which is why you do test-driven development, personally, is because it makes sure that my bare minimum is at least properly sufficient. But it also means I am eliminating waste. Because if we think about rigor and maximum, we could be wasting our time doing stuff that is not important. Does it fulfill the requirement? Yes, then that's good enough. Why should we go now? If the requirements are not strict enough, if the requirements are not articulated hefty enough, then that's a problem of who has articulated the requirements, not the person that's employing the work, not the person writing the implementation. That is, there's not enough unit tests in place. There's not enough end-to-end tests in place. There's not enough requirements being stated. There's not enough architectural documentation. There's not enough discussion amongst the team regarding technical practices. That has nothing to do with the work that this person's doing. Because if they are getting it done, right? If they're getting the work done that gets the job done, then that's all that should be necessary. It's about making sure that the requirements, the standards are high enough that that minimum level of work is good, and that you have eliminated all of the extra wasted effort, right? The lazy developers are good because they eliminate waste. They find ways to automate things. They find ways to do things lazily so that you don't have extra effort more than what is necessary and creating more extra work for everybody. So honestly, like, I get it, Chris, the author of this article. I get what you're saying. Like, there's a certain level of professionalism that we expect, a certain level of effort that we expect. But at the same time, if you are not creating the requirements up to the standards that they need to be, then that is not the fault of the developer for not exceeding the standards you are setting. Again, control yourself, not them. You cannot control the other person. You can only control what you do. You have to set the standards. You have to set the requirements of what needs to be done. You can do that through testing, right? Unit testing, end-to-end testing, integration testing. You can set those standards. You can do it through an architectural document. You can do it through a team working agreement where you establish the technical norms of the team. You can do all of these things, but you have to do them. And if you don't do them, you can't just expect other people to know what's on your mind and what you expect of them. Okay? That's the thing. You can only control yourself. You cannot control them. You cannot expect them to exceed your expectations when you haven't even told them what your expectations are. Okay? I write an endpoint. I need a new API. One of them would return 2 or more rows for recipients who may or may not already be in the database. I didn't know Django well enough to do it perfectly. Not knowing where Python ends and Django begins, I really dislike Django. It shows no coherence or idiom. But I wrote out all the logic and status codes. Okay, so you put together, you kind of wireframed up this little basic back endpoint, right, for them to work off of. I needed a new API, one that would return 2 or more rows for recipients who may or may not already be in the database. I didn't know Django well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but I wrote all the logic. Suppose I called this API seeking the encryption keys for 10 people. Here are the number found and the HTTP status codes in my original bad Django. Okay, so number returned is 10, HTTP status, full success. Number returned 1 through 9 is partial content, 206. Number returned 0 is 204, data not found. And server exception 500. A 204 for 0? I don't necessarily agree with that implementation for... that's a weird status to be trying to return for 0. Because it seems like it would be successful. I don't know. That's weird. Suppose like that you're using the status code in order to indicate a range of number of results. I don't think that would be the way I would implement it, but okay, we'll move on. If the response had fewer rows than the number requested, I returned an array of their not found identifiers. So, okay, I see. So he's trying. I still wouldn't do this as a status code. I mean, it needs to be atomized. The thing that bothers me about this is that you're relying upon the back end to tell you what the front end is trying to decide, right? Like, how do you know? Like, I would give more information. I would just, like, the status codes should not be telling you about the context of the data. That's really just not quite right, in my opinion. But again, I should probably move on from that. It really should just be, you should have more data being transmitted in a JSON document okay, that tells you more information about this than just trying to get a number return and using a status code to tell you the partiality of the return results. That's probably not the right way. Anyway, if the response had fewer rows than the number requested, I returned an array of their not found identifiers. I turned it over to L to fix up the Django syntax, not to rewrite it, but this is what he did. Well, okay, so the 400 exception, if it's a server exception, yeah, that should be a 500. But I actually agree with that. That's actually the right way. A 200 is a success. We're talking about the negotiation of your content, not what is in the content, but the negotiation of your content. That's what the status messages are for. They're a piece of metadata about the communication between the front end and the back end. They are not to contain information about the values. You can do that in the headers. Okay, you can do it in the headers in terms of like passing information about, this data was partial. You might add some sort of meta keyword, some sort of metadata in the headers of the response. But typically, if you're going to have some sort of status of the data, that should actually be in the actual returned object in the body of the document that's being returned. It should not be a status code. So these first strings, I'm sorry, but 1 through 9 being a 200, that is not wrong. 0 to 200, that is not wrong. That is a proper result. We did the request. Your request was received and interpreted properly. We had a successful request. Here is the number of results that we found on the back end. There were 0. That does not indicate that there was a problem, right? 204 data not found. I get it. Like, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to use the status codes to tell you meta information about the value, but that is the improper use of HTTP protocols. Okay. So really what happened was the backend developer was right here. Now I agree with you. This was wrong. This should have been a 500, right? This should have been, if there was an actual server exception, it should have been a 500. So you were correct on that one, but these other two, they were either okay or, data stored or whatever, we couldn't find, like your request processed successfully, but 0 means, okay. So data not found, and I suppose this is getting a little bit pedantic, maybe even for this video, but 0 is the actual proper result. It doesn't mean that there was no information found. And maybe I can kind of understand why you're wanting to get the data not found here. And maybe this should be, again, one of those team working agreement things where you're trying to envelop in the status code these values. I just disagree with it. I think that these kind of pieces of information should be embodied in the results, in the body, the JSON object that's being returned back, rather than trying to do it through the status codes. The status codes should be about the meta information of the request. Like your process was requested, but we didn't find any data, is a little bit different than we processed your request, but the results of that were that there's nothing. It's a little bit of I get it. It's a pedantic it's a distinction without a difference, maybe, is what you might say. But this just inherently, there's something wrong about that to me. Like that should be, I think that is a 200 because you're successfully processing the request. That's just how many pieces came back. That's how much we found was 0. That is an okay, we processed your request correctly. So even if not a single row was returned, he called it a complete success, and he removed my array of the rows not found. So the client had to enumerate the returned data, compare to the request, and determine which ones didn't come back. And a server exception returned 400 bad request, which was completely wrong. So that I agree with. So even if not a single row was returned, he called it a complete success. That's right, because the server processed the request successfully. It processed your request properly. And he removed my array of the rows not found. Okay, this is atomization. Like there's a, you're trying to, this is not proper RESTful services. Okay, and we could go into, I don't really want to go into HateOS, but yeah, I'm not going to. But the thing about the response is that it should not give you information about how the request was processed. Okay, like that you can so this is a common thing, that a separation between command and query, right? The CQRS. Okay, command. Oh, come on. I always say command query response separation. Yeah, that's right. Command query response separation, CQRS. So you need to be separating out the commands from your queries. Okay, commands are go do this thing. Queries are tell me how much of this you've got. Okay, and that's really just it. So if you want more information, it should be in the body of the response. It should not be so. Here is the object that contains the data of the payload of what you are expecting. The metadata, which is the status, should be about the request itself because it's metadata. It's not about what's in the data. Okay? And so, yeah, and he removed my array of the rows not found. Yeah, because that could be followed up with a separate request. Like, do you find these rows? Okay, so it is actually kind of on the front end in that case to say, okay, database or back end, how many of these rows do you find? Like, I'm going to give you a set of rows. How many of these do you actually find? I find 0 of them. Okay, let's go through one at a time and let's add them, or let's do whatever the work is that needs to be done based upon those things. If you wanted a more complex response, then that's what you should that's what you should say, not based upon number returned, but rather here is my request to this endpoint that says, here are the records I want you to tell me whether or not they exist, and give me back. My query is, here are my request includes these records. I want a response object that tells me each one of the records that you found and include this information about them. Okay, but that does not belong in the status code. That belongs in the body of the message. That belongs in the payload. Okay, and so using your status codes, that's not the right thing. And I think that's why there's this disagreement in how things should be articulated. If you were more explicit about what kind of information, so if you were saying, here are a set of rows, send back to me these records that don't exist on the database. Like, if that was your explicit request, then I think you'd have an argument to say this guy did it wrong. But the fact that you are trying to do it based upon number of records returned and the status codes, that's kind of janky. You're using two different platforms of where information is being distributed on this response object that don't quite fit with how they're actually supposed to be conceptually used. But again, totally with due respect, Chris, I know I'm totally hacking away at this thing, and you and I could probably have difference of opinions on this, and I'm sure that there's 20 other developers you could probably pull up in an hour that would all disagree with me too. I totally get that. But I just think that this is part of the reason why this is going wrong, is because the request that you're trying to put together of what you want from the back end, you conceive of it this particular way, and you wrote your front end in order to accept that type of data. But I think that the way that an API is trying to talk to your front end is wrong. And maybe what you really just need to do is pair program on this. Like, this is what pair programming is all about, is solving these type of issues. Because the communication and the understanding of, he's trying to do things to his best technical expertise, you're trying to tell him how to do his job that is actually against the way he would technically implement it. And the only way you can actually fix that is not by calling him an idiot. Okay? You don't call him an idiot. You say, let's sit down and work together on this so that we can come up with the proper way to communicate between our front end and the back end. That's what pair programming is for. That's why you pair program, is so that you can have those communication discussions while you are actually doing the programming, so that you can facilitate that conversation around a concrete example so that you both understand the logic and the reason. And you may be able to convert him into your way of thinking. You may be able to work with me. And as ardent as I am about saying that this is the wrong way to do it, you and I might communicate together about this, and I might see your point and understand why you want it to be done this way and change my mind or make this an exception. Okay, I very well could make it an exception. But if you don't have the conversation and you just call me an idiot, chances are I'm going to be a little bit harsher back to you. I'm going to call you an idiot because you're the one that's telling me the wrong status codes to return back. Right? And that's not going to help. That's not going to facilitate a good conversation. That's not going to facilitate a good working environment. And let alone do I think that he's a terrible developer. It just means there's a disagreement. And disagreements don't make for bad people. That's going back to politics, man. Isn't that a statement? Disagreements don't make for bad people. Okay? You have to learn how to disagree appropriately. And I think that is a skill that is severely lacking in today's society. Being able to communicate with people you disagree with and be friends with them. Be able to talk to them. And this divisiveness of them versus us is destroying so many relationships and the fabric of our society that it even propagates here in software development. It's sad. But yeah, I do agree with this. That is, if the server had an exception, and if it was an actual server exception, like it actually threw an error, there was an error, an actual exception being thrown, then that should be 500. Okay. If your request cannot be found, like, hey, there is no endpoint. That resource you are requesting for, it doesn't exist on the system. That is a 400. So I'm not sure, and at this point, based upon what you've been telling me about your skills as a back-end developer, you may want to make sure that you're talking about that correctly. Is server exception the correct term for what it is that is being done? Is your request, the front end request to the back end going the proper route? Is it hitting an actual resource on the server? If it is not hitting a resource on the server, then it is not a server exception. It is a 400 bad request. If the back end is trying to find a resource, thinks that a resource exists, but that access to that resource throws an error and that bubbles up to the user interface, or I should say the API, then yes, that should definitely be a 500. But there is a distinct difference between whether or not something cannot be found versus whether something has gone wrong. Okay, one is it's not you, it's me. The other one is it's you, it's not me. Okay, and you need to make sure that you have the proper distinction there. The guy was supposed to be their back-end expert. I expected him to know these codes. I don't know every single one of them, but I know the dozen or so most common ones. And even with the logic and correct status codes right in front of him, he threw it all away and did it his way. Let's just do this real quick. Actually, yeah, that's just a basic one. I think the Wikipedia one has a little bit more. Yeah, this is a little bit more data. So, okay, standard request for success responses, right? The server successfully processed the request and there's not returning any content. I'm not giving you a 0 back. Okay, this goes back to this thing up here. The reason why this is not right is because I'm not giving you anything. You made it like this would be for, say you had a command that said, hey, go create this record for me. Okay, I successfully created that record. I'm not giving you any, there's no reason to give you any data back because you just gave me a command. You told me to go do something, but there's no data being returned. The fact that you want a 0 returned means you are asking for data back. You're asking for a 0 back. So a 204 is not the correct status code. 200 is the correct status code. So actually, he's not wrong. It is a 200. That is the correct response. Same with the 1 through 9. That is a correct response. I am giving you data. We have processed your request. It is not a partial. Okay, partial content 206 means the server is delivering only part of the resource due to range header sent by the client. The range header is used by HTTP clients to enable resuming of interpreted downloads or a split download into multiple simultaneous streams. I have 200 records, but first, in order to facilitate this communication, I'm only going to give you the first 100 of these, and then I'm going to give you a second response with the other second 100. That's what the 206 partial response means. It doesn't mean I've processed your request, but I only found this many. So, going back to, this is what you wanted? There's a reason why he coded it correctly. This is the correct set of responses. Okay? So, it's not on you, dude. Or it's not on them. He actually gave you the correct responses. So maybe he's not as much of an idiot as you think he is. Maybe he is the expert that he actually says he is. Okay? And that the company is employed. And you telling the manager that he's wrong on this? Right? If I was your manager and you came to me and said, look at these status codes that I told him I wanted and look at what he returned back for me. And I'm a back-end developer and I'm a front-end developer and I know both of these things and I am a manager. Okay, I'm a subject matter expert for all of this. So you come to me and tell me this guy's an idiot, he's doing it wrong. I'm going to look at you and I'm going to think, what makes you the expert? Like, why? They're doing it right and you're coming to tell me that they're doing it wrong. Who does that negatively reflect upon? Them or you? Okay? I'm just saying, like, this is a concrete example that you're giving and it's not right. Maybe that's one of the reasons why the management has stopped listening to you. I'm just saying. And even with the logic and correct status codes right in front of him, he threw it away and did it his way. That's right. He did it the correct way. It's not his way. It's the correct way. It is the standard. It is the standard restful standard. Okay. This is what you do. You atomize. I was furious. Management reaction. I was furious. I had done it all correctly except for the Django syntax, which he could have fixed in under a minute, but instead he rewrote the whole thing with stunningly wrong logic. And of course, his code looked like a pair of cats had fought on the keyboard. Ha 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 ha. I asked the managers for a conference call. I showed them what I've written above. They tut-tutted and said they would talk to L about it. I don't think they did because 2 weeks later, it was still unchanged. And they paid this guy. Right, because he did his job. He did his job correctly. And now, again, if you had paired programmed with him, if you had actually worked with him instead of deriding him to the managers and worked with him, then maybe this could have been, you could have gotten it your way. It's entirely possible. If you could have explained why you wanted it this way, and then maybe, just maybe, he would have been able to explain to you why the way he did it was the right way. And then you would be much more knowledgeable. You would understand why that was actually the wrong way to do it. But instead, you've decided to make it a personal beef. You made it a personal beef, not him. You did. Okay? And I'm calling you out, dude. I'm calling you out, Chris. I'm sorry. I got to say it. I'm calling you out. You are making it a perfect personal beef. You may be an exceptional developer. I'm not questioning your skills as a developer. I imagine you are probably a top-notch developer. Okay? But in this particular case, this example that you were giving, you are actually in the wrong. So be careful when you're telling other people that they are idiots, and when you're telling management that those other people are idiots, that you aren't actually the idiot, right? Like, you got to be careful about that. Be sure you're right. Be absolutely sure you are right. Don't just guess. Have the technical articles that are there to tell you that you're the right one. Okay? So if they didn't talk to L, then they probably decided I was bringing conflict to the team, though they never told me so. Well, that's because you were. You were. I think that's a correct identification. This was my last item in the work. All my stuff worked except this mangled API. I was done with 3 new languages under my belt and experience in a really cool cryptographic implementation. Cool. I'm glad that you learned something about that, dude. That's awesome. I didn't bother talking to L. What would be the point? Everything that I just mentioned. You could have actually learned something instead of being the know-it-all. Instead of being the guy that knows everything, you could have actually learned something. He had done a bare minimum lousy job and his work ethic was just fine. Well, first of all, if he had done just the bare minimum lousy job, that would have been to do exactly what you wanted him to do, which was just fill in the gaps, fill in the underlying pieces that you had already pre-written. Instead, it seems like he went above and beyond to actually correct what was the system that you had created. He went above and beyond and fixed the status codes and implemented the API correctly. So he actually went above and beyond what you were asking him to do. Okay? So that wasn't the bare minimum lousy job. In previous debates on design, he had contributed nothing. I could have mentored him, but I knew from months of working with him that he would have ignored me and gone on doing things the way he was accustomed. Sloppy, shoddy, and ineligible. Or illegible. Frankly, dude, I wouldn't want to be monitored with this attitude. I wouldn't want you to mentor me. I mean, I get it. I do. It's frustrating working with people, but if you're going to have this kind of attitude, I don't want you to be the person that mentors me. I'm just saying, I mean, I would like to pair program with you. Maybe we could come up with a better, working environment between each other and respectful, but not as long as you're going to continue to go to his management and say that he's doing shoddy, sloppy work and demand that something be done about it, and then blame managers because they're going to keep the correct implementation that he did. Like, I don't think that makes you necessarily the right individual to be telling people what to do. I'm just saying, and again, I'm making it personal, Chris. I apologize. I shouldn't be making it personal. And I don't know you from Adam. I have no idea who you are. Okay, and I guess maybe what I'm really trying to do is direct this not necessarily at you, but at my readers. Okay, as kind of a good example, or not my readers, my viewers, as an example of what not to do. Okay, the situation you are describing is not an uncommon one. But you have to understand it is not always on the other person. It's usually something to do with you. Okay? Managers who don't know code, as with so many who say that people skills are more important than coding skills, the managers on this project were more interested in keeping things nicey in the team than doing a solid product. Yeah. Because you're working on a team. This is this is a selfish statement. Okay? You are a part of a team. This other individual is on your team. And yes, you have to be able to work with that other person, because if you don't, and if you focus strictly on the coding skills aspect, you will get such highly opinionated versions of you become your work. You become your code. And once you become your code, any sort of disagreement about the way you wrote your code is going to become personal. Okay? Any discussion about your code is going to be, and I think that's probably why I got so carried away with calling, you were doing this, you're doing that, is because you were making it personal. You were making it about this person and how they wrote it and how you did it and how you wanted it. Instead of saying the code is written this way, they wrote code this way too. Okay, or this was the code that they presented. So you made it personal. You became your code. And so whenever you do that, whenever you emphasize the coding skills over the people skills, then the code doesn't get better because everybody becomes entrenched in they are right. They are right. This is the right code, which we see right here, right? This is the right code to be writing. And that's not the correct attitude. You need to have a cooperative working environment around what are the correct standards by which this team will operate. They may not be necessarily the standards you want, by the way. The way that other people want to work. Maybe this person, L, wanted to write the API that way, and they're following the best standards and practices of their discipline. But you may have the disagreement. You may talk to your entire team, state your case, and turns out that the team decides, no, actually, we want to stick to the correct standard. We don't want to change. We don't want to deviate because we already have the standard in place by which all the other APIs that we work with ascribe to this standard. So just because you may think that your way is the right way or will be the easier or better way because of several different reasons, you might not necessarily get your way. Even if you are the correct one, even if you are right, you may not necessarily get your way. Okay? And that's one of the things that we have to negotiate. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but that is the challenge that you have to overcome. It is not about them, it is about you. If there is a disagreement the team has with your position, you have to learn to accept. It's frustrating. It's one of the most frustrating things when you know you're right. You can see the brick wall that the team is about to hit headlong, directly smack into that wall. You can see it. You're telling them about it. And they're like, no, we don't see that as a problem. And then 2 weeks later, bang. And you were right the whole time, right? And that happens. That happens all the time. But that doesn't mean that that you need to impose your will upon the rest of the team by talking to management. Okay, that's the wrong attitude. The right attitude is let's work this out as a team because we all have to work this together. Like we've got to work cohesively. That's why we're talking about people skills. And management is there in order to help facilitate those people skills, to make sure that the communication between the team is good. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like managers on a team to begin with. This is one of the reasons I don't like managers on teams to begin with, because it gives an escape. It gives an easy route for people to handle their disagreements. I'm just going to go complain to the manager. Instead of talking to the person directly, I'm just going to go talk to the manager. And if the manager doesn't do exactly what I want them to, then they're a bad manager. That's the attitude. And that's simply because there is a manager in place. If you don't have a manager, if you didn't have a manager, how would you handle this situation? That's what you have to do. You have to let managers guide you on how to have interpersonal skills, but don't go to them about your grievances. Okay, there are times and places for grievances. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Okay, there are definitely places where, if somebody says something or does something that is like against the rules of the business of the organization, then yes, that should be reported. Okay, like sexual harassment or something. That absolutely needs to be reported. When it comes to just working together with these kind of things about negotiation between front end and back end, there is no reason to bring a manager into it. None. There's zero reason the manager should be involved. Okay? If you're talking about the quality of work of a person on the team, there is zero reason that should go to the manager. None. It belongs to you and the team. The team is writing the code, not them, not the one person, not you. You are actually also co-authoring that code. Okay? You're doing it through a series of constraints of the discussion and telling them what it is that you need. So you are helping to author. You may not be actually putting pen to paper or keys, fingers to keyboard to do the implementation, but you are helping them identify the constraints of what it is they have to write. So you are in effect, as a team, co-authoring the code. And even better yet, write some tests. Put those in place. This is how the code needs to operate. Look, all my tests are failing. Can you write some code that will actually make these tests pass, please? Okay, then it doesn't become about you. It doesn't become about them. It becomes about the code. Because the code says this is not passing. Okay? Since this was a very security-centric application, it was more vital than usual to do the most rigorous job possible. but they allowed L's sloppy rewrite to remain. It sounds like acceptance criteria is not being fully flushed out. If there are security-centric concerns, then you need to make sure those are articulated in the scenarios and acceptance criteria. Okay? You got to be writing tests, man. How are you supposed to know that the job has been rigorously done if you don't even have something that tells you it's been done? That's what tests are for. Tests help you automate that process. Are my tests passing? Yes. Okay, great. We're done. Otherwise, everything else is gray area. And gray area leads to, are you doing it rigorously enough? I don't know. Their attitude toward my report was probably that there was some friction between me and L. I got along fine with everyone and managed to mask my frustration with L and his mysterious context loss episodes and god-awful code, and my part was about done. So much came of this. And my part was about done, so not much came of this. This is what comes of regarding software development as a social activity. It sure as hell isn't engineering yet. But had I been the development lead, L would have been looking for another job. I might have to post a response here to this because I think there's so many things that are wrong. And maybe I'll just post a link to this video. And you know, again, Chris, if you do watch this video, I violated my own rule there several times. I totally admit that. I made it about you and I shouldn't have made it about you. And I think I was just kind of drawn into the fact that you were making it about interpersonal skills and the people involved. And it should be about the code. It should be about the technical practices, and it should be working together as a team. The perspective that you shouldn't be working as a team and we should all be siloed according to our job skills, that is waterfall. Okay, that is a form of waterfall. Now, your team may be doing waterfall. You know, that may be how you guys have agreed to do things. I doubt it. But, you know, because most teams nowadays are trying to be agile. But yeah, I think that there are some serious problems going on with the way that you're perceiving this. And I don't mean to make this about you, but I'm trying to help you understand why what transpired happened. Okay, and the attitude that you have can change. You can't change L. You can't change the managers. The only person or people you can change are only person you can change is yourself. Right? And this goes to all my viewers. Everybody who's watching this right now. The only person you can change is you. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do about the situation? Don't expect that a manager is going to solve your problems for you. What are you going to do about it? Okay, and make sure that you are trying to solve those problems, because that's the way that people see you as a leader, or think that you are, or come to you, or see you as the person who's going to solve the problems, is because you have demonstrated the ability and the capacity to change yourself and adapt to the situation and circumstance, rather than telling everybody else what to do, telling everybody else how to act, how to behave. That's what's going to create division and derision in your team. And if that's happening, then you're going to continue to get the same thing. And it's not going to be about the code. It's going to be about you. And that's what we need to try to get away from. Okay. All right. So hopefully you guys learned something from this. I'll retitle this video to properly reflect what it was that we did in this video. Because again, when I started out today, I didn't have a plan on which topic to talk about, but luckily we discovered this one in my email, and I think it's a good one. Again, Chris, Mr. Fox, you probably hate me now because I said a lot of things, and I guess that's a good example. Like when I make it about you, you're probably going to be very defensive. Understandably so, because you have a perspective on this, you have an opinion about this, and it shouldn't be about it shouldn't be about you. It should be about doing code better and about working together better. It seems like from your final statement, though, I'm just going to say, it doesn't seem like that interests you at all, about working together better. It seems like you're only wanting to focus on the technical practices that you do, and everybody should just leave you alone. And I hate to tell you this, but that is actually going to make you a worse developer. You can be as technically proficient as you want, but nobody will want to work with you. Now, you may have some people that work fine with that because maybe they have the exact same attitude. And so far, there has been no conflict between you and them on how to do something. But the moment that there is a conflict about how something should behave, all of a sudden you will start calling them an idiot and going to their manager. And that is what facilitates poor communication. That's what facilitates bad code, actually, is because you have to have differing opinions reviewing the content in order to refine it and make it better. But if this is all supposed to be about yes men or yes women, all agreeing to the way that we're doing things, that's not going to refine anything. It's just going to be lazy and not putting it in. I shouldn't say lazy. It's not going to build better code, okay? And your skills are not going to improve. Your skills will not improve if you do not listen to people with different opinions or different expertise, okay? That's why I really like pair programming. That's why I like mob programming. It's because you bring a whole set of variety of different skills to bear on one problem, and people learn from that exchange. So anyway, all right, I'm going to cut it off on there. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I certainly did. I think this is a great topic, and maybe I should talk about stuff like this a little bit more. But hopefully you guys did learn something. Hit that thumbs up button. By the way, if you didn't get a notification or receive any sort of notification that I was going live, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell, because that will notify you when I go live. So if you missed me live, you've been watching this video recorded and you want to catch me when I'm going live, that's how you can find out. So make sure you do that.